If you've sailed with Charlie Bengal before, you undoubtedly know two things about him. He's a terrific sailor, and he can spin a yarn with the best of them. What you may not know is that in the late 1970s, Charlie circumnavigated the globe. He sailed around the world, a feat that few sailors have accomplished.
I think I learned to sail when I was 7 or 8 years old. There was a yacht club in New Jersey called the Brigantine Yacht Club. And I remember my dad, who was in the Navy in World War I, he was a sailor too. He sailed boats. And he took me over there, and I learned to sail on a little, I think it was a 10 or 12 foot, they called them snipes. It might be equivalent to a Lido today. And I always loved it. All through my life as I grew up, I sailed small boats. And then when I got older, I bought a 28-foot sailboat and sailed up, believe it or not, sailed over to Bermuda. Sailed back, and then I decided, I said, if I can be successful enough in my endeavors, I'm going to sail around the world. I always dreamed about it. So it was around 72, 73. I decided to buy a bigger boat, and I bought that, in fact, the boat you see up on the wall there, a 45-foot Ketch. I bought it in 1973, brand new, and I took 3 years to outfit it with, naturally, if I was going to go around the world, I wanted to do it in as much comfort as possible. I had refrigeration and air conditioning and a freezer and, autopilot and all the gadgets. It took me 3 years to do all the installations and getting it ready. It was June of 1976. I took off from Atlantic City, New Jersey, went out Atlantic City Inlet, and headed for Bermuda. It was a 6-day trip. Bermuda's about 600 miles off the coast from New York and that area. And I figured I was going to make it in 4 days, but I checked the weather forecast before I left, and they said, oh, beautiful weather. We got 2.5 days out, and a northeaster came down and whacked us for 3 days. We hove to, and finally we got to Bermuda on the 6th day. So I hung around in Bermuda till December. I had to wait out the hurricane season, which in the East Coast is from about June till about November. So I figured, what better place than this to stay? And I was at that time, they had airfare between Philadelphia and Bermuda was very reasonable, and you go back and forth very easily. So I would fly back, and forth, back and forth. And then finally, all the paperwork done on getting rid of my business and getting the money in the bank. And just about a week before Christmas, off we went to the Caribbean. We headed from Bermuda and headed down south. I think we took 10 days to get to St. Thomas, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Stayed there a few days and then went over to St. Croix, which is south of St. Thomas. Stayed there a few days and then started heading down island. Left from there, and went over to the British Virgin Islands and through the BVI's into Antigua and St. Kitts, St. Martin's. We went all the way down to Grenada. We stayed in a small island called Bequia for a while, which is one of the islands of Grenada. It was a yachtie's paradise. All the yachties seemed to hang out in this small island. It was just friendly to yachts. We stayed there for a couple of months. And then headed from there over to the Dutch West Indies, Aruba, Curaçao, and Bonaire, which was about 1,000 miles from where we were staying. We hit all of the 3 islands, a few days at each one, and then ended up over in Panama. Went through the Panama Canal, On the West Coast, we waited for a few days and we picked up a few extra crew members there. In those days, it was not like today. You're afraid to even pick up a hitchhiker on the road. But, you're getting somebody to go sail with you on your boat out in the ocean. You don't really know. But in those days, it was no problem. I met an Australian fellow at the yacht club there in Panama, and another fellow we had actually met in Grenada. So we ended up with 4 of us heading across the Pacific. We left there and went over to the Galapagos. And I always wanted to go there. Very interesting place. It took us about 6 or 7 days to get there. At that time, you had to go to the embassy, Ecuadorian embassy, and get a special permit to stay. You couldn't just go in there and say, oh, we're going to stay here for a few weeks. But there is a loophole. If there's a problem with your boat, or there's something that's broken down and you have to get emergency repairs, you can go to any port. That's nautical law. So we figured, well, we'll stretch it a little bit. We stayed there for about almost 3.5, 4 weeks, almost a month. We had to order some parts from the States. That took a little bit extra time. And finally, they got there. We got the boat working again. Then we headed west. We went through the western tier of the Galapagos. We left there for the Pacific. It took us 21 days without sight of land. We went from Fernandina all the way over to the Marquesas. That's over 3,000 miles further than going across country. It took us 21 days. There's no land, nothing at all. It's just open ocean. We didn't see a boat. We didn't see a fishing boat. We didn't see a liner. We didn't see any kind of life, except sea life, between the Galapagos and the Marquesas. Nothing. The wind blew 20 knots every day from the same. It's a trade wind route.
So that's how you did it in 21
That's
days.
right. The wind was blowing behind us every day. One of the most easy, pleasurable sails I had in my whole trip. We ended up in Nukuhiva, which is actually the furthest one west. We have to feed 3 people for 21 days from 3,000 miles. You don't pull into the nearest grocery store and say, hey, we need some extra this or some extra that. It's got to be on the boat. So when we got there, we really supplied up. And from there, we went over to the Tubuto Archipelago, they're just small little flat islands. There are a few small facilities there, but not very much. And we basically just stayed one night here, one night there. Well, we got over to Tahiti. That was our first stop after the 2 Mudos. Oh, and to make life interesting, so we had to start the engine and charge it up. Well, I had the engine running, and all of a sudden I heard click, 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 bang, 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 boom! Engine quit. We threw a rod to the engine. We have no motor. We have no way of getting into Tahiti. We have to sail there. No way to charge a battery, so we shut everything down. We just didn't worry about the freezer or the refrigerator. We were only about 2, maybe 3 days out. Well, we got off of the entrance to Tahiti, and we called on the radio and called on the radio, and finally we got somebody to come back in English. So once we got into the inlet, he came out, and I said, hi, how you doing? And he got hold of, we threw him a line, and he towed us in, and we threw a couple lines out. There were some other people helping, and we were tied up. There we were, safe and sound in Tahiti. I did all the work on the boat myself because I figured if I was somewhere where there was no mechanic, nobody to help, if you don't know how to do your own boat, you're out of luck. So I hauled the engine out. I brought a complete set of tools to work on anything on that boat no matter what it was. Disassembled it. We had to order a new bearings and a new piston for, I forget which one. We couldn't get it there in Tahiti. We had to order it from Australia. So luckily we found some place that could get it ordered for us. They ordered it from Australia. We waited about a week, and the air freighted it there. We put the engine together, put it back the same way as we took it out, and this was a series of almost a month. Got the engine all together, got it running, we were all set. Tahiti is a great place to visit, so we spent some time and rent a motorcycle and cycled all the way around the island, all the way around. And saw all the sights that I could see. Actually, I like Papeete. I like the city the best of all. It had so many interesting things there. I really enjoyed that. When I originally started out this sail, I said to myself, I think I can do it in 18 months. I was going to sail around in 18 months. 4 years later is when we finally finished. Things change, you know. We left Tahiti and we sailed over to Moorea, which is only about 15 or 20 miles away. I figured we'd stay a few days. I met a fella, American. He wrote articles for Playboy magazine. So I thought, an interesting place to write articles in Moorea. So, we said, oh, we're going to try and walk around the island. He said, it's too big. You're never going to walk around. He said, look, I got a little sports car here. He said, here's the keys. Go ahead, drive around and go around the island. So we borrowed a sports car and we drove around the island, saw everything we wanted to see. So after Moorea, we went to Raiatea, Taha, which are part of the Society Islands, and then we ended up in Bora Bora. Now Bora Bora they have a beautiful resort there, and it's a beautiful island, one of the most beautiful islands. And I remember renting a bicycle there and biking. The island's not that big. I biked around the whole island and looked it all over. And in the middle of the bay where we were anchored, there was this small islet, you might call, near another resort. And we went out there, and they had a volleyball court on there. So we all played volleyball in Bora Bora. And we stayed there for a few days. And there were a lot of other Americans there, too. We celebrated New Year's in Bora Bora. And there was an American yacht there. This guy was I don't remember his name now, multimillionaire. And so he invited us all over for a New Year's Day or New Year's Eve party on his boat. The liquor floated like water and food, everything. I mean, this thing was so enormous. He had a stern deck on there. It was like a dance floor. It was that big. And we all had a good time there. And actually, next day, it was New Year's Day, and we decided, well, that's a good time to leave. So we left New Year's Day and headed for American Samoa. I think it took us about 9 days to go from Bora Bora to American Samoa. And our first stop was in the big island, Pongo Pongo. Oh. Everybody knows Pongo Pongo. That's the capital of American Samoa. I had been back to the States in over a year now. Yeah. So I found that they had flights that it's American territory. See, if I wanted to fly back from Tahiti at that time, the cost was prohibitive. I mean, it was expensive. They had a nice anchorage in Pongo Pongo. We tied up the boat, stern to a dock, and there was enough Americans there. I said, look, it was a different time. So I said, are you guys going to be here for? Oh, yeah, no problem. I said, could you just keep an eye on my boat for a while while I'm gone? No problem, we'll take it. Probably today you come back, the boat would be gone. But it was different then. So I got a flight on Pan Am from Pongo Pongo up to LA, and then I got an American flight back to New Jersey. And I was there for, I stayed there for about almost a month back, visited my family and flew back. Got back into Pangapang. Boat was there, perfect condition, no problem. And the people watched said, oh, everything was fine. I had no problem. We had one storm come through, but it wasn't that bad. And that was it. So after that, we stayed there for about another 3 weeks. And we left there, and we went from there to Western Samoa, which is only like 80, 90 miles to the west from American Samoa. So we stayed in Western Samoa for just a few days. I was only myself, and I was looking for some extra crew. So in those days, they had a yacht club, and here was a couple of gals from San Francisco who said, oh, we'd love to go sailing down to Tonga. And then I said, okay, you want to, do you have experience? Oh, yeah, we used to sail in San Francisco, blah, 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 blah. And this English gal comes and says, are you going over? Well, I had an all-girl crew, would you believe? An all-girl crew from from Western Samoa to Tonga. I think it took just, 4 days. We got there, and naturally the three gals who had sailed over with me, they had to leave, so I was there alone. I was going to sail solo. Well, I could sail my boat solo, but, it's tough when you're 24 hours a day,
Yeah. Get a ship
So while I was there in Vavau, the northern area of Tonga, they had a nice little place. It was a little bar and a restaurant, right there overlooking the water. So I think I was there having a cold beer and everything. It was like a tight-knit group. All the yachties would get together wherever we were, no matter where in the world. And I was sitting there talking. I says, I don't have any crew. I'm sailing solo. And these two guys are sitting there. Oh, you need some crew? Are you going down to the southern group in Tonga? I says, yeah. Well, if you need a couple of crew, we'll go along with you. I remember one fellow's name, Ed Hacker. Why? Because, believe it or not, after all these years, he just sent me an email. There was another fellow from Australia. I can't remember his name, but he came along too. So they helped me sail the boat all the way down into, this is how you picked up crew members. And you'd think, well, if you did that today, you'd be crazy.
Yeah.
But so they sailed along all the way down to the southern group of Tonga, and I stayed there for a week or two, and then I was going to go over to Fiji. Again, same problem. I needed crew member, and da. Well, there was a young guy there, and he says, oh, you need a crew member? He said, I've had some experience around the Bay Area. So he came along, and there was another gal who was also she wanted to get over to Fiji. So we left. It took us maybe 5-6 days. We got into Fiji, and I hung around in Fiji for a while. It was a very nice island. We went out to a national park there. Had a good bay, it was very safe and secure. And I stayed there for probably close to a month. From Fiji, we left and we went over to, it was called the New Hebrides. It was the New Hebrides before it was Vanuatu. So I was in this little club, little bar, and I'm having a beer and I got something to eat. And I'm talking away there and saying, I'm going to sail over to Australia. And this Australian guy says, if you need any crew, I'm going over to Australia. So, got a crew member there. And I only stayed a few days there and left from there and went to the Loyalty Islands, which is south of them. And we stopped there for just overnight, and went from there to Lord Howe Island, which is off the coast of Australia. And we just stayed there overnight in the bay just to get a break from sailing. All the Aussies go there for vacation. It's subtropical. It's a beautiful place. So we stayed there for a few days, had a good time, and then left for Australia. And we went there and headed towards Sydney. On the way, we hit what they call down there a southerly buster. It was one of the worst storms I had ever been in. We had to heave to for 24 hours, and we survived. I'm here now. So a storm finally let up, and we ended up sailing right into Sydney Harbor, and it was early October, which would be their spring. And we ended up staying in Australia for almost 6 months. Almost. In the Sydney area, we probably stayed there for about 4. I would take trips out to the outback and, just see everything I could see in Australia. It was really a great time. You're only allowed 6 months. That's the maximum you could stay there. But we left Sydney almost about a week before the 6 months were up. But we fudged a little bit. So naturally, we went up the coast and stopped at Brisbane, and all the towns along there, up through the Barrier Reef, and ended up over in Darwin. We stayed in Darwin for about a week. I'll say one thing about the Aussies. They're very easygoing. They didn't press us. So, we're going to leave pretty soon. We're going to go over. We're going to be leaving pretty soon, From Darwin, we went over to Indonesia. We had a great time there. I guess we stayed for 3-4 weeks. I remember renting a motorcycle. In those days, I was a young kid compared to what I am now. So we rented a motorcycle and took off and saw the island. I spent there probably a week. I had to head off from there. And now another big ocean's coming up. And this is naturally the Indian Ocean. And it's a long way. It's just about as far as across the Atlantic or even almost the Pacific. We know there's a few islands in between before you get over to the end of the Indian Ocean. So we stopped at a few of them. We stopped at Christmas Island. Went from Christmas Island. We stayed there for a few days. They had a little yacht club there, Christmas Island Yacht Club. The Aussies had built this little small building. You went in there, and they had believe it or not, they had a microwave in there, and they had a refrigerator, and it's this honor system. Whatever you take, you just pay for it. They had a little box there. You put your money in there, and you can grab a little bite to eat. And so that's great, So I got something to eat while I was there. And while I was there, a couple of Aussies come in, and this one guy says, "Yeah, I'm going to go out to the golf course and play a round of golf." I said, "You've got a golf course here on Christmas Island?" He said, "I used to play golf." I said, "When I'm back in the States." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'm leaving tomorrow. If you want to stay over, I'll let you borrow my golf clubs and my shoes." And I played 18 holes of golf with a couple of his friends on Christmas Island. Would you believe? I've got to say one thing. The Aussies are some of the friendliest people I've ever met. So we stayed there for a few days and then decided to head off for Cocos Keeling, which is just about almost in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So we got into Cocos Keeling. What they do there, they check you in and check you out at the same time. So we went in, they had, believe it or not, they had a yacht club in Cocos Keeling, a very small, it was mainly for the convenience of the cruisers that would come through. So I went in there that evening, had something to eat there, and then next morning, we're off, because it was getting into the season where you're going to get storms. We left Cocos Keeling and sailed to Mauritius. And I guess we were probably 2 days out of Mauritius, rather. And it was blowing extra hard this day. And all of a sudden I heard, rip! And my main ripped from the clue to the head. I mean, I had a massive tear. I had gotten a new head sail when I was in Australia, but the main looked pretty good. Well, luckily, my boat's a ketch. So we're going mostly downwind.
Yeah.
So we could use our running spinnaker
Yep.
and use the mizzen for a little bit of steerage and now. So, but there was an island before Mauritius called Rodrigues. I had no chart for the entrance to this harbor there. And you know, there's reefs and rocks.
Yeah.
But, so we waited until the sun got up high,
Yeah.
and we visually ran our boat in through the reef and everything and got in and anchored. And I told them what happened. They said, oh, we have a sail, we have not a sailmaker, but a seamstress. So I said, you think she can repair this sail? Believe it or not, we stayed there a couple of days. We took the main off. She stitched that thing up, put a patch over it, and it held all the way into Mauritius.
No kidding.
Yeah. We had met a couple of people in Australia, a couple of Americans, a guy and his girlfriend. And they said, hey, if you ever need any crew members, let us know. Here's our address, you know. I think I sent him a telegram. He was over in Singapore. He was going to stay while I was there. So I sent a telegram to this hotel in Singapore. And I told him I was staying at the yacht club there. And he sent a telegram back and says, we'll be flying there in about 4 or 5 days. So we waited around. I rented a taxi, would you believe? He gave us a tour all the way around the island. So we hung around for a few days, saw the sights. And this couple, they were from Redondo Beach. And believe it or not, they helped me sail the boat from there to South Africa, to Durban. And in the meantime, my daughter Marion, she says, Dad, when you're ready to go across on your transatlantic, she says, let me know and I'll fly in and I want to do a transatlantic with you. I stayed in South Africa for almost 4 or 5 months. We went up to wilderness area there. There's a national park just east of Durban. We went there and you got a regular guided tour, saw all the animals, and it was great, you know. And in the meantime, my daughter Marion flew in, and she got on the boat with us, and we went all the way around the coast, all the way up to Cape Town. Stayed in Cape Town a few days, and then off we went. We went up the coast of Africa. We went to the island where St. Helena, Napoleon was interred there, and we went from there to Ascension Island, and then over to a South American island, Fernandina Rona, which is a resort off of South America. It's 400 or 500 miles off of South America. It's a island that belongs to Brazil. It's like Bermuda is to the United States, Fernandina Rona is to Brazil. We got there and there was a little harbor we were in. We had to go in by dinghy. So I got the boat out maybe out 200-300 feet off the shore. It was well protected. But there was a lot of surf rolling in. So this couple, they said, oh, we know how to bring it in. I said, you sure? I said, it's tricky on there. Oh, yeah. So they went in first. Sure enough, they upturned the dinghy. They got soaking wet. But he left his girlfriend ashore and he rowed back. And I took the boat in the second time and I got through the surf okay. Well, we only stayed there overnight. And then from there, we left there and ended right up in Brazil. Fortaleza, Brazil is where we finally came into South America. We only stayed there just for the day because I was in a rush to complete my circumnavigation. I was so close that I don't want to waste any time. We left Fortaleza and headed right up for Bequia. It was nonstop. We didn't stop at any place. It was early morning and the sun was coming up, and we were coming around and I could see the islands just like 10, 15 miles away. And I'll tell you, when I got to Bequia, it felt like the end of the world almost for anything. It was just so wonderful. Went ashore, went into the little bar that I had seen 4 years before, and got myself a cold beer, and hey, I finally made it. And that was my trip around the world. That was it.